you should never at week 8 be forced to switch from that choice to something less healthy just because your coach thinks that you're desensitized to it. What's up, guys? Derek, moreplatesmoredates.com. Today we're going to be talking about what I wish somebody taught me about swapping compounds. So when I first started getting into bodybuilding and learning about pharmacology and whatnot, I would, watch and listen to the gurus, and I would see, common breakdowns of protocols and forums and stuff like that. And there was this idea that would circulate in the community that you need to swap compounds every 6 to 8 weeks or else your body gets used to them. So at the time, this made complete sense. Like, why would you, logically, you would think, oh, you use a drug, your body gets used to it, and then you have to switch drugs to keep your body guessing. You know what I mean? It's like, kind of laughable when I think about it now. It's like muscle confusion. You hit you with some Deca and your muscle's like, oh shit. And then another 8 weeks and then you switch it to the trend. Your body's like, oh shit. And it keeps growing. But over the years, as I've done more research, I've started to realize how ridiculous this bro science swapping compounds theory is. And I just kind of wanted to elaborate on why I wish I knew about this sooner. I wish somebody taught me about this, and this is by no means an instructional guide of how to cycle for performance enhancing use, but this is a good harm reduction strategy that will probably improve your bodybuilding outcomes in addition to keep you safer. So the thing is I was always told you need to swap compounds at week 8 because of the reasons I outlined. The problem with this is, it goes back to also the test-based thing. Everyone's like, oh, every cycle needs test, because if you don't have test, then you're fucked. And it's like, but no one explained why. And the whole root of everything goes back to why you're using something to begin with. So the first thing you need to know, or I needed to know, as far as the foundation of a cycle. So this is something I wish I knew way back in the day, because it would have, saved me a lot of potential health ramifications that have perhaps accumulated and may, you show up down the line because of this, or, whatever. Hair loss, things that could have been avoided had I known sooner. So AR activation, androgen receptor activation, is accomplished in the same mechanism by any of these steroids. Steroids are steroids. They are designed to bind to the AR and transcribe effects in tissues and, cause gene expression. That's the whole point of using them. However, it's not like when they bind, they cause a desensitization of the androgen receptor. In fact, they actually upregulate it. So there's this theory that the androgen receptors downregulate after continuous use, which I've debunked in a previous video about, do androgen receptors downregulate? And basically what you see is the complete opposite. They actually upregulate in the presence of androgens. And in addition to that, the thing that causes the perceived downregulation is just myostatin elevation and or additional counteracting mechanisms that have yet to be discovered. But as far as what we can tell, myostatin appears to be the primary determining factor as to if growth is going to be hindered or not, as opposed to AR downregulation. So when you take your testosterone replacement therapy and your testosterone binds to the androgen receptor and induces its effects, do you eventually have to increase your dose of testosterone or cycle off the testosterone to make your TRT work again? No, just like you don't need to cycle off of your fucking balls producing test, because they bind to the AR exactly the same. All these androgens just bind to AR and transcribe effects. They don't downregulate the receptor. What downregulates is your ability to accrue muscle mass in response to the androgen receptor activation, because you have this elevated level of literal biomarker that's hindering you from gaining more muscle, aka myostatin. So when you hit week 8 and you have myostatin elevated because of your use of superphysiological amounts of androgens, your body's trying to prevent you from gaining an unhealthy amount of muscle. There's a reason why this mechanism is in place It's the same sort of idea with any sort of thing in your body. Too much of anything is never going to be good. So when you have too much androgens, your body has counteracting mechanisms to try and, get things back to homeostasis to where they should be. When let's just say you hit week 8 and you're on like testosterone and masteron. Let's just say you're on those two. When you hit week 8, or let's just say you're on testosterone and primobolan. So you hit week 8, you're on testosterone, bioidentical hormone, thoroughly studied, very good, clinical outcomes, very predictable, very, safe based on, the fact that we naturally produce it. You know what to expect more or less. Not safe, but, relative to other more obscure androgens that are, created in guys, chemistry labs or whatever that aren't meant to be produced by the body, that aren't produced by the body. Probably better outcomes in terms of safety profile and way more clinical data backing it, obviously. So testosterone. You also have primobolan, one of the most well-tolerated, arguably the most well-tolerated steroid ever developed. And hordes of data, very good tolerability, good outcomes. Good, tissue selectivity, lots of good things going for it. And you hit week 8. So now, based on what your bodybuilding guru has taught you, you now have to switch your primobolan to something else because it's not working anymore. So what do? You switch to, perhaps another, androgen of formidable, efficacy and safety profile, or you might switch to something like tren, or you might switch to something like EQ. Things that have no place I shouldn't say no place, but things that are probably not going to yield significantly different muscle building outcomes, but have potentially higher risk profiles. So I'm not going to say that, I'm not going to argue about like which one's more stronger at building muscle. Obviously, trenbolone strong. We're not going to argue about that. But as far as just like the fact that if I'm on, I don't know, Nandrolone, for example, and I hit week 8, what do? Switch to another 19 Nor now because what other 19 Nors am I going to switch to? Trestolone? Or am I going to switch to Tren just because my Nandrolone has stopped working at week 8? Like, this is the kind of logic that these coaches are giving out. What they're completely failing to realize is that AR activation does not get downregulated by the binding of these androgens. So you're telling me to basically, what happens in a lot of cases, and is what I've done in the past when I was, using, like blasting these compounds, is I would be on a good, like, foundation cycle with, the least likelihood of bad side effects and bad outcomes. And I'd hit like week 8, and then I'd be like, okay, now I have to switch to a compound that's more dangerous than what I'm using because the compounds I'm using are no longer working, when it just wasn't the case whatsoever. That's what I'm trying to get across here. Like, the problem with this whole bro science theory is there's no need to swap. Like, you're not changing anything by switching from Nandrolone to Tren to Trestolone to EQ to D-ball to whatever the fuck. Like, at the end of the day, you're binding and activating AR. You're trying to transcribe effects in tissues exactly the same. You're not accomplishing anything different by using a different hormone other than if it has a better level of tissue selectivity or it's stronger milligram for milligram or whatever. But at the end of the day, you would ideally be using compounds with the best outcomes, least risk, the lowest risk profile, and just the overall best chance of, you being healthy and achieving what you're trying to do. You should never at week 8 be forced to switch from that choice to something less healthy just because your coach thinks that you're desensitized to it, because it just doesn't happen. And if I knew that earlier, it would have saved me a lot of stress on my body using compounds that I didn't even want to use in the first place because I didn't feel that they were as efficacious and safe as other ones that I was, desensitized to. So that's what the whole point of the video is. So be careful what guys tell you, because a lot of the times they don't know what they're talking about, and they're going to give you information parroted from decades past of other guys who don't really know what the fuck they're talking about. So thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe, check out my blog, moreplates.com. Check me out on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, follow me on Instagram, check out the podcast, link video description below. Drop a 5-star rating if you don't mind. It helps the algorithm. Drop a comment, helps the algorithm on YouTube a lot. So when you guys do that, much appreciated. Subscribe to the newsletter, link description below. Basically, if you get on the mailing list, then I email you every time an article goes live, and those are like far more organized versions of my videos with table of contents, All the clinical studies I reference are linked there for you to actually go view yourself rather than just hear me like talk about on the video without actually having some sort of like organized way to like relay it to you. So some incentive there to sign up for the mailing list. So thank you guys for watching. Talk to you soon.